The following video are for commentary purposes only. Fair use.
You miss him, don't you?
Yeah, man. I like.
Simple words from a grieving father. 1-year-old Cohen Wiley was shot and killed by Senatobia police almost a week ago. It happened in the Walmart parking lot as that Walmart in Senatobia was closed today.
A call to boycott Walmart comes almost a week after 1-year-old Cohen Wiley was killed in the parking lot here, and protest organizers are also calling on the retail giant to release video of a reported shoplifting incident in the store before baby Cohen was killed.
We know from leading organizing around the Jaheim McMillan case that Family Dollar released their video to the family's attorney. We know that Walmart could release that video being a private entity. They don't have to wait on the police, and there's nothing the police can do. So we just asking to see.
A call for transparency continues. People in Senatobia are asking to see surveillance video of the reported theft that ended with Senatobia police shooting and killing 1-year-old Cohen Wiley. On Tuesday, hundreds came out in protest. Police ended up deploying tear gas to disperse the crowd.
I know that they were testing us, and this is warfare, and that's how I treat it. So I know we were testing them as well to see their response, to see how they would react, to see how many officers they have, to know and come with a larger force. So they're gonna do what they're gonna do, and we're gonna do what we're gonna do. But I can assure you, we're not gonna stop until we get justice for baby Cohen.
Skinhead, deadhead, everybody gone bad. Situation, aggravation, everybody allegation. In the suit, on the news, everybody gone. Bang, bang, shot dead, everybody's gone bad. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us.
Korean scholar. Korean scholar. Waking up the people of the Most High. Got the knowledge to destroy the lies. DNA, history, open eyes. Walk into the darkness and turn on the lights. Wake up, 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 wake up.
Welcome back, everyone. We celebrate the 250th anniversary of America's independence this Saturday, July 4th. Of course, that independence and freedom was not always for all to enjoy. Enslaved for the first 2 decades of his life, it was the abolitionist Frederick Douglass who in his time was considered the statesman who often wrote and spoke most eloquently of the evils of slavery and hence the ironies of July 4th. In 1852, he famously said, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?"
While this country is celebrating the 250-year birthday, let's take a listen to the speech Frederick Douglass did, read by his descendants.
Do I look there or look there? Okay.
Just wait here for a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. My name is Alexa Ann Watson, and I am the great-great-great-granddaughter of Frederick
Douglass is my great-great-great-great.
I'm the great-great-great-granddaughter of Frederick Douglass.
I am the great-great-great-great-grandchild.
I've been counting on my fingers since I was like 5.
Here we go.
This is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom.
Fellow citizens, I shall not presume to dwell at length on the associations that cluster about this day. The simple story of it is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects.
Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not go mad, they became restive under this treatment.
With brave men, there's always a remedy for oppression.
They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary.
Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence?
Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us?
I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary.
Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common.
The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me.
The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me.
This 4th of July is yours, not mine.
You may rejoice, I must mourn.
Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions.
At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed.
Oh, had I the ability and could reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke.
For it is not light that is needed, but fire.
It is not the gentle shower, but thunder.
We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake.
The feeling of the nation must be quickened.
The conscience of the nation must be roused.
The propriety of the nation must be startled.
The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed.
And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim.
To him, your celebration is a sham.
Your boasted liberty an unholy license.
Your national greatness, swelling vanity.
Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless.
Your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence.
Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery.
Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings,
with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him
mere bombast,
fraud,
deception,
impiety,
and hypocrisy. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country.
This speech was written almost 170 years ago, but this part of it is still extremely relevant, especially with today's protests.
I think that when people are oppressed, they feel silenced. And if someone feels silenced, they get angry. There are certain tactics that you need to use to get people to really hear your voice. And it's not always going to be just like a very calm discussion.
I think he's mostly talking to the people who are already on his side, but believes that they can still try to talk this out, or that things are still justifiable. I know a lot of people at the time were saying, and people now are still saying, that it's not as bad as it could be.
While the 4th of July probably does not feel the same to me as it does to others, I wouldn't say that it has no meaning, because it is the time when America as a country became free from another country. But I would say that it's not the time in which I gained my freedom.
He had a lot of hope, especially for his age. And I'm getting to the point in my life where I'm only 20 years old, but I'm exhausted. I have these thoughts like, will we ever really get to this point? Or is this really something that we should actually spend our time fighting for?
Somebody once said that pessimism is a tool of white oppression, and I think that's true. I think in many ways we are still slaves to the notion that it will never get better. But I think that there is hope, and I think it's important that we celebrate Black joy and Black life, and we remember that change is possible, change is probable, and that there's hope.
Has much changed? You know, I've always had a conflict when it comes to this celebration, but especially now as we look at the history of how it's treated the African people who were brought to this country. I've always had to ask certain questions.
It's frustrating as an older man who's lived through it to know that our people don't realize that things are in cycles. My grandmother told me this because my grandmother understood what was happening in the 60s more than my mother did. My mother was a child of the Depression, and they came out of the Depression. You got to have things. You got to have, you got to have a freezer with 50 years worth of food in it. You got to have things. And my grandmother was a young woman in the 20s when things opened up. The Roaring 20s. The Roaring 20s was everybody was making money, And then the Depression closed up again. And she always said in the 60s, because she was the one who was encouraging me to be involved in civil rights and all these other things, that, you need to take advantage because things are going to open up. Go to school, get an education, because there are going to be all kinds of opportunities. And when I came out in 69, there were all kinds of opportunities.
Yeah.
But now, close back.
Yeah.
And it's hard for y'all to find jobs. It's hard for y'all to get a leg up. And they've gone back to some of the old craze. They even started making us monkeys again. It's almost like Reconstruction. They denigrate any contribution we make legislatively. And, everything that, it's like Reconstruction. It's like they really are afraid of, like Francis Cress Welsing said, why is it they hate us more than they hate anybody else? Why is it they hate us more than they hate anybody else? They seem to accept the Asians. They seem to accept everybody else except us. Why is it they hate us more than they hate anybody else?
All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us.
Meanwhile, the talking heads are telling us racism's not a problem in this country. Everybody have the equal chance. Look at how many people we have successful who are black in the country. There's black movie stars, black professionals that makes a lot of money. But does that make up for all the injustices that have been done throughout the centuries to our people? Did it change how they treat us in the societies? Does it pay the unpaid debt? Yes, there's black movie stars, black athletes. Meanwhile, while we're distracted and looking at them perform, we're still losing.
It's 107-106. The one that inbounded, nobody guarded him, and he went right to the rim. Perfect timing. But now the Spurs have a chance.
Now, let's take a look at Dave Chappelle. In comedy, there's none bigger than him. But Dave Chappelle took a stand on principles because of his treatment in Hollywood.
Chappelle walks on stage and refuses to be funny. No punchline, no escape, just a cigarette, a microphone, and the sound of a country pretending it doesn't owe anything. The crowd is not laughing. That is the first clue.
Comedian Dave Chappelle, he addresses you directly.
Dave Chappelle speaking out.
Dave Chappelle is Dave Chappelle.
Tiny little town called Yellow Springs in Ohio.
So he's back with a Netflix special.
Only someone like a Dave Chappelle is able to do.
This is Dave Chappelle, the comic who turns racial wounds into rooms full of dangerous laughter. The man who says the thing everyone is afraid to say, then makes the room admit they were thinking it too. But tonight, in a gravel pit in Yellow Springs, Ohio, standing inside of a pandemic, weeks after George Floyd is killed on camera, he's not performing comedy.
And I was shocked that nobody ever talked about what it feels like
To watch a man get murdered that way by a man in a police uniform.
He's counting seconds. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Everyone assumes this story is about Chappelle. It's about the country that made him possible, exploited him anyway, celebrated him when the money.
The following video are for commentary.
Are X-rays.
In
Man get murdered that way by a man in a police uniform.
He's counting seconds. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Everyone assumes this story is about Chappelle. It's about the country that made him possible, exploited him anyway, celebrated him when the money came in, then pointed to his bank account as proof the debt was settled. By the end of this film, Chappelle stops looking like proof America works and starts looking like the evidence in the case against it, because a rich man can still be owed money. At 250, the question is not whether black people have made progress. The question is whether the progress has ever been accepted as payment. Whether one successful comedian, one black billionaire, one black president, one gentrifying neighborhood can erase a bill that's been growing for hundreds of years. That is where the real story begins. And Chappelle is just the door.
Change is never like a comfortable proposition. It's uncomfortable before it's comfortable again.
Everyone knows the myth. Chappelle walks away from $50 million at the peak of his powers.
I thought my career was over. I believed that for a few more years. So I went through the whole process of mourning the narrative that I had in my head of being a big star.
Gets on a plane to South Africa, and the whole country decides he must have lost his mind. But the money was never the story. The story was a sound. A laugh. Not just any laugh. The kind of laugh that makes a black artist stop and ask, wait, who is this joke actually serving right now? Chappelle has always had an ear for that. He knows the difference between a laugh that tells the truth and a laugh that confirms a lie.
Reading a joke is a lot different than sitting in a room and hearing it. And part of the sitting in the room part of one of the reasons comedy works is because everyone that bought a ticket, clearly they want it to work. They want to have a good time. They want to have fun.
That is what made him dangerous. Not just the jokes, the ability to hear what the room was really saying after the punchline landed. So before we talk about the $50 million, before we talk about South Africa, before we talk about the rumors and the headlines, we have to go back to that room. January 2003. Chappelle's show premieres on Comedy Central. The public thinks it's watching a sketch comedy show. Look closer. These are not just jokes. They are x-rays. Clayton Bigsby, a blind black white supremacist who does not know he's black. The racial draft. The Pixie sketch. Each one cuts into something America pretends it outgrown. Then the market explodes. Season 1 eventually nears 3 million copies sold, one of the best-selling TV DVDs ever made. Season 2 moves close to 500,000 copies in a single day. By 2004, Comedy Central's primetime audience is up 28%, making it one of the fastest-growing cable networks in America. And Chappelle's vision is driving it, which forces the real question: who actually owned the explosion? And that is when the laughter starts to change. Not in the writing, not in the performance, in the laughter. As the show gets bigger, the audience gets wider. And wider means less of the audience that understood what the show was actually doing, and more of the audience that was just entertained by the thing the show was trying to expose. Chappelle starts hearing something in the rooms. A laugh that is a little too comfortable, a little too satisfied. Not the laugh of someone whose assumptions just got challenged. The laugh of someone whose assumptions just got confirmed. He talks about it later. A white man on set laughing at the Pixie sketch in a way that made Chappelle feel wrong. Not the wrong of a bad joke. The wrong of a joke landing somewhere it was never meant to land. It was not the only reason he left, but it became the sound that crystallized what he had already been feeling. The machine does not always silence black truth. Sometimes it lets the truth speak, strips it of its danger, and sells the performance. Chappelle built a show to make America look at itself. America looked and bought the DVD. When Chappelle heard the wrong laugh, he could tell people were taking from him right in that moment. The joke was his. The revenue was theirs. The target of the satire was laughing along and calling it entertainment. This is the thing that does not get talked about enough when people tell the Chappelle story. It is not just the industry that took advantage of him financially. It is that the comedy itself, the art he built to tell the truth, was quietly being used against the people it was meant to defend. A sketch designed to expose how America sees black people gets watched by people who enjoy seeing black people that way. The exposure does not change them. It entertains them. And the machine surrounding the show does not care about the difference. To the machine, a laugh is a rating. A rating is $1. You can't measure the right or the wrong of a joke on a balance sheet.
All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us. All I wanna say is that they don't really care about us.
On a path toward racial justice that was amazing. There was the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. We were at a tipping point.
Let's listen to Jeffery Robinson, an attorney who has a unique way of looking at the truth about our history and who we are as a country. You can need to see a special, Who We Are, on Amazon Prime. This is a clip from a speech given at a local university.
It is an incredible privilege to be here this evening to have a chat with you. Thank you so much for being here. I have been a criminal defense lawyer almost my entire career, and the best movie ever made about a criminal defense lawyer is Anatomy of a Murder. Jimmy Stewart has a great line in that movie that I learned and has been with me as I've been a criminal defense lawyer, and the line he has is, people aren't just one thing. A person can be a good father, a good brother, and also a bank robber. A person can be a good mother, a kind community member, and also a drug addict. And countries aren't just one thing. America is a great country. And America is a country that was founded on the premise of white supremacy and white superiority. I'm not going to pull any punches in my comments tonight, but what I am going to do is ask you to think about America in perhaps a slightly different way, and to think about where we started and how we started and how ingrained white supremacy has become in America. It's become so ingrained that we don't even notice it. And one way to think about this is to check this, because about 50 years ago, Muhammad Ali went to Great Britain, and he was interviewed about America, and he tried to talk about white supremacy with a little bit of humor. And I'd like you to listen to what he had to say.
Things are getting much better, but I always wondered when I went to church on Sundays. I've always been one to, I'm not just a boxer. I do a lot of reading, a lot of studying, I ask questions, I go out, travel these countries, and watch how their people live, and I learn. And I always ask my mother, I said, Mother, how come is everything white? I said, why is Jesus white, blonde hair, and blue eyes? Why is the Lord's Supper all white men? Angels are white, Pope, and Mary, and even the angels. I said, Mother, when we die, do we go to heaven? She said, naturally we go to heaven. I said, but what happened to all the black angels they took the pictures? I said, oh, I know. If the white folks was in heaven too, then the black angels were in the kitchen preparing the milk and honey. So listen, you quit saying that. Well, I was always curious, and I always wondered why I had to die to go to heaven. Why I couldn't have pretty cars and good money and nice homes now. Why do I have to wait till I die to get milk and honey? And I said, Mama, I don't want no milk and honey. I like steaks and I said, milk and honey is a laxative anyway. They have a lot of bathrooms in heaven. Anyway, I was always curious. I always wondered why. You know, Tarzan is the king of the jungle in Africa. He was white. White man. I saw this white man swinging around Africa with a knife on, hollering. Oh! You all see Tarzan over here? Tarzan? And all the Africans, so he's beating them up and breaking the lion's jaw. And here's Tarzan talking to the animals. And the Africans been there for centuries, and he yet can't talk to the animals. Only Tarzan can talk to the animals. I always wondered why Miss America was always white. All the beautiful brown women in America, beautiful suntans, beautiful shapes, all type of complexions, but she always was white. And Miss World was always white. And Miss Universe was always white. And then they got some stuff called White House cigars, White Swan soap, King White soap, White Cloud tissue paper, White Rain hair rinse, White Tornado floor wax. Everything was white. And the angel food cake was the white cake, and the devil food cake was the chocolate cake. So Mama, why is everything white? I always wondered, and the president lived in the White House. And I never had a little lamb, his feet as white as snow and Snow White. And everything was white. Santa Claus was white. And everything bad was black. The little ugly duckling was a black duck. And the black cat was the bad luck. And if I threaten you, I'm going to blackmail you. I said, Mama, why don't they call it white male? They lie too. I was always curious. And this is when I knew something was wrong. Won the Olympic gold medal in Rome, Italy. Olympic champion, the Russian standing right here, and the Pole right here. Is Poland considered a communist country? Yeah, I'm defeating America's so-called threats, enemies. And the flag is going ton, 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 ton. I'm standing so proud. Ton, 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 ton. And I done whooped the world for America. Ton, 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 ton. I took my gold medal, thought I'd invented something. I said, man, I know I'm going to get my people freedom there. I'm the champion of the whole world, Olympic champion. I know I can eat downtown now. And I went downtown that day, had my big old medal on and went to breakfast. At that time, black things weren't integrated. Black folks couldn't eat downtown. And I went downtown and I sat down and I said, a cup of coffee, hot dog. He said, the lady said, we don't serve Negroes. I was so mad. I said, I don't eat them either. Just give me a couple of I said, I'm the Olympic gold medal. 3 days ago, I fought for this country in Rome. I won the gold medal, and I'm going to eat. The manager heard her tell the manager, and he said, well, I'm not the man. Now he's got to go out. Anyway, I didn't raise no money. They put me out. And I had to leave that restaurant in my hometown where I went to church and served in their Christianity and fought and daddy fought on all the wars. Just won the gold medal. They couldn't eat downtown. I said, something's wrong.
Something's wrong. And this is a difficult topic and a difficult subject, in part because our history has been stolen from us. And it was done intentionally and purposefully. And when you are asking a human being to reject what they have been brought up with, what they have been taught by their parents as the truth, what they have seen in their schools and in their colleges and universities as the truth, when you're asking somebody to all of a sudden say, that's a lie, and the truth beneath that is really ugly, you're asking for somebody to do a really hard thing. And I think it's important for us to remember that as we talk about these discussions. But a hard thing is where we are, and a hard thing is what we have to do. Because everyone will remember George Orwell in 1984. And there are two things that come from that book that I will ask you to remember, and to remember very carefully. First, who controls the past controls the future. Because if you control the narrative about what is true about our past, that narrative sets the mark for how we go forward in the future. If you control the truth about the past, then you have the path to the future. And who controls the present controls the past. We can laugh when our president and people in this administration say things about our communities and our history that we know are just not true, but people are listening. When the President of the United States, when cabinet members are talking to America about what is true and what is right, it makes a difference. And when we do not deal with the ugly part of the truth about our history, we have no chance of going forward in any kind of productive way. So let me say this. You can take down every Confederate monument in America tomorrow. It ain't going to feed anybody. It ain't going to get anybody out of prison. It's not going to put good water into Flint, Michigan. It's not going to solve all the racial problems we have in America. What getting rid of the Confederate monuments will do is, in my view, begin a process of making Americans like you and me, who were never taught the truth about our country, it will make us deal with the truth. And that's a scary thing. Never underestimate the pull of the status quo. Because if we are really going to acknowledge what I'm going to suggest to you is our true history in this country, it has implications. What does it mean about the wealth that I have? What does it mean about the comfort that I live in right now? What does it mean about the place I work at, even a place like the ACLU? What does it mean to examine how things got here today to be the way that they are? Those are very uncomfortable questions. And what I'm suggesting is we are at a tipping point. Either we deal with this or this will tear us apart. Don't read this book. Under no circumstances should you read this book. This book is about drug abuse, about childhood sexual abuse, the stuff that's knocking around in that book you do not want bouncing around in your head late at night when you're trying to go to bed. Don't read this book. But do understand the title of this book. Because William Burroughs got the title for this book from one of his Beat Generation co-workers and co-friends, Jack Kerouac. And when Burroughs was asked, what is naked lunch? What does that mean? Here's the answer that he gave. And that's what I'm going to ask us to do tonight, to have a naked lunch moment with race in America, where we have to actually look at what is truly on the end of our fork. Because if we look at that, what we're going to see is not very pretty. Do read this book. It has great examples of how American politics has used code words and dog whistles to hide our dependence on white supremacy. And I want to give you an example, because I know you have heard in this entire debate, well, there's a difference between heritage and hate. And there's a difference between Southern culture and slavery. And the monuments are celebrating heritage. They're celebrating culture. They're celebrating Southern pride. And people have understood these code words for a long time. And they were never explained better than by this man.
I approach that issue as a statistician or a political scientist, or no, as a psychologist, which I'm not, is how abstract you handle the race thing. In other words, you start out, and now y'all are quoting me on this. You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger, that hurts your backfire, so you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights and all that stuff. And you get so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously sitting around saying we want to cut taxes, we want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than nigger nigger, you know. So any way you look at it, race is coming on the back burner.
Any way you look at it, race is going to get put on the back burner. So don't say nigger, just say states' rights. Remember that. as we talk about our history, because that man learned from what we have done in the past. People think that the South lost the Civil War. They lost the war, but they won the peace. And they won it by rewriting the history of our country. And that's what I'd like to talk about this evening some. So we have our president saying the history and culture of our great country is being ripped apart by the removal of beautiful statues. You can't change history, but you can learn from it. Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, who's next? Washington, Jefferson. And it's so foolish. And also the beauty that is being taken out of our cities and towns will be greatly missed and never able to be comparably replaced. I have an easy way for you to think about this. George Washington owned slaves. He absolutely did. The Washington Monument, if you go to Washington, D.C. and look at it, it's got nothing to do with slavery or the Civil War on it anyway. I think what he was honored for was, I don't know, forming the country, being the first president. The fact that he owned slaves, you are absolutely right, and I'm going to talk about that. But that monument is not a monument to fighting, killing others, and being willing to die yourself so that you can enslave people and treat them as chattel. That's the difference between the Washington Monument and the Jefferson monuments and the monuments that I'm going to talk about. So, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. And what greets me as a citizen of Tennessee when I go to my state capital in Nashville, where my grandparents lived, this is what I see. Nathan Bedford Forrest. And you can see Confederate States Army, Lieutenant General, and his birth date and his death date. There is nothing else on this monument except the fact that he was a Confederate States General. Well, he made a fortune in Memphis as a slave trader. And he was the original Grand Wizard of the KKK. He led a Confederate massacre of black soldiers and white soldiers, American soldiers, during the Civil War. And this monument wasn't put up in 1865 or 1866 with people saying he's such a hero, we have to recognize him. This monument was built in 1970. 2 years after Martin Luther King was shot in the neck just down the road from Nashville, Tennessee. That is the yearbook from Nathan Bedford Forrest High School in Jacksonville, Florida. It's the most recent version that I could find from 1993. This is now called West Side High School in Jacksonville, Florida, and that name change occurred in 2014. And if you're wondering what the Civil War was about, how about not listening to pundits from today or politicians from today? How about going back and listening to the people that actually fought that war and what they have to say? If we ain't fighting to keep slavery, then what the hell are we fighting for? I got a couple of days ago an email from a gentleman who sent me an article about the Robert E. Lee family, because Robert E. Lee's descendants are still alive and in Virginia. And he said, I hope you understand that, these descendants are not their ancestor. And I know you're going to give this talk, and I hope you will have in your mind and in your heart empathy, not sympathy, but empathy for his family today. And I want to say, could I just see a show of hands in this room? How many people in this room have ever owned a slave? I see no hands. Robert E. Lee's family, the people that exist today, they never owned slaves either. Slavery is not our fault. We have no responsibility for it. It is part of our shared history. And that's what we can't walk away from. And one of the things that this gentleman sent me was a Washington Post article where one of Robert E. Lee's descendants was saying, we were always taught that our ancestor didn't fight to protect slavery, he fought for Virginia. And what I want to do is just to read you the end of some comments from someone much more eloquent than me on this subject, W.E.B. Du Bois, written in 1928, on this topic. What was the Civil War fought about? And when people say, we were taught that he didn't fight, he wasn't fighting for slavery, he was fighting for the South. It is the punishment of the South that its Robert Lees and Jefferson Davises will always be tall, handsome, and well-born. Their courage will be physical, not moral. Their leadership will be weak compliance with public opinion and never costly and unswerving revolt for justice and right. It is ridiculous to excuse Robert Lee as the most formidable agency this nation ever raised to make 4 million human beings chattel instead of men and women. Either he knew what slavery meant when he helped maim and murder thousands in its defense, or he did not. If he did not, he was a fool. If he did, Robert E. Lee was a traitor and a rebel, not a hero. I feel for the family of Robert E. Lee that's alive today, because this must be a really difficult time for them. This is the price you pay when you live a lie, when your view and understanding of history is based on a lie. Because when the truth comes to town, it really hurts when you're ripping that lie off. So, Anniston, Alabama. I just want to give you a sense. When we talk about Confederate monuments, what are we talking about? And I'm just going to give you an idea. So in Anniston, Alabama in 1905, they decided that they wanted to honor this man, John Pelham. And that is a statue or a picture of the monument of Mr. Pelham in Anniston, Alabama. This is word for word from the United States Civil War website, not a Confederate website. This is something put up by our government. And this is what it says. John Pelham fought with such valor and dedication for the Confederacy, giving his life in that cause, that he has become a symbolic of Alabama fighting men in all wars who have offered themselves to defend the state, the nation, and the principles in which they believed. Those principles are simply one thing: white supremacy and belief in slavery. This man resigned from West Point just a few weeks before he graduated so he could come back to Alabama and join the Confederacy. And I'm going to go back for just a second. Take the word Confederacy out of that statement and put the words Nazi Army in, and see how it reads. He was a genius at killing the enemy. In the Battle of Fredericksburg, he kept the entire Union forces in disarray by himself, by firing artillery, running to the next piece of artillery, firing it, making the Union think that there were a large number of troops at their flank when they actually weren't. And it led Robert E. Lee to call him the gallant Pelham. This man died during the Civil War. He was an expert at killing the enemy, meaning American soldiers. And when you talk about the rhetoric that we have today about our military and about American soldiers and what we owe to the people who put their lives on the line, this man was slaughtering American soldiers. And they built a monument for him. Everybody remembers the Edmund Pettus Bridge and Bloody Sunday. Heck, they made a movie about it. But who was Edmund Pettus? Well, that's who Edmund Pettus was. The grand of the Alabama KKK. And that bridge was dedicated not in 1865 or 1870, but in 1940. And we'll come to that timing as we go through this, because the timing of these monuments, I think, suggests something that's very important in terms of understanding what they're about. This is one of my favorites, I will just tell you. If you have, can I see a show of hands? People here who have been to Stone Mountain, Georgia? So there are some people, and I'm glad to see that. But I'm betting you don't know the entire story of Stone Mountain, Georgia. Because on Thanksgiving Eve in 1915, William Joseph Simmons took these things to Stone Mountain, Georgia. He took bricks where he made an altar. He took the American flag. He took the Holy Bible. He took an unsheathed sword, and he took a cross. And he made himself the new imperial wizard of the KKK. That's what Stone Mountain, Georgia is. It is a monument to the KKK. Now, its history is interesting. That's what it looks like. It is the largest bas relief in the world. Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and Thomas Stonewall Jackson. Conceived in 1912 by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Deeded to the United Daughters in 1916. They started working on it with the KKK in 1922, but it was abandoned for 36 years until the state of Georgia purchased it and created the Stone Mountain Memorial Association to complete the project, and it was completed in 1972. And finally, this one. I got a call from a Washington Post reporter several weeks ago, and he said, I want to talk to you about these monuments that have been in the news a little bit recently, and I'm having some confusion. First of all, did you know that there was a Confederate monument in Arlington National Cemetery? I told him, no, I had no idea. And he said, well, it's not on, like, if you take the tour there, they don't really take you by it. They kind of point at it and say, and over there's a Confederate monument, and they kind of push you on by. But he said, I have some questions about it, and have you ever seen it? And I told him, I haven't been there. I had no idea it was there. And he says, well, I'm trying to figure out what is a mammy. And I asked him to repeat his words. I said, what did you say? And he said, I'm trying to figure out what is a mammy. And I said, well, I can tell you what a mammy is. And I said, you're going to see a black woman with a handkerchief around her head holding onto one or two white kids. And he's like, hold it. I thought you hadn't been to the monument. And I said, no, I haven't. I just grew up in America. I grew up black in America. I grew up in the South in America, and I know exactly what a mammy is. This is from the website of the Arlington National Cemetery. The vignettes include a slave following his young master, an officer kissing his infant child in the arms of her mammy. This is definitely a monument to history. But monuments are built to honor history. I am not honored by this, and neither is any other black person in America. That's in Arlington National Cemetery. told you that our history has been stolen from us.
That's what America is about. A land of dreams and opportunity. There were other immigrants who came here in the bottom of slave ships, worked even longer, even harder for less. But they too had a dream that one day their sons, daughters, grandsons, granddaughters, great-grandsons, great-granddaughters might pursue prosperity and happiness in this land.
You can laugh if you want. Bill O'Reilly says on national television, yeah, the slaves built the White House. They had nice places to live and decent food. The state of Texas is teaching that slavery was a side issue to the Civil War. Our history is being stolen from us. And what I would say to Mr. Carson is that the idea, just these little code words, they were immigrants, not slaves. And if you think that he's the only one, there's another person from the administration the other day who was calling slaves workers, not slaves. This kind of rewriting of history matters, because if slavery wasn't that bad, then what the hell are you still complaining about it for? Why don't you black people just move on? Why can't you get over it? If it wasn't that bad. And so when this man says people came over here with dreams of prosperity, I will grant you that there were dreams. I think they were more like nightmares. And I think the dreams had to do with, we don't even know what these people are. We can't even understand their language. We understand the end of the whip. That's a universal language that we understand. There were nightmares that people had, and trying to change that is the rewriting of our history. This is where the South won the Civil War. They didn't win the war, they won the peace by rewriting what our history is truly about. And so, I want to take you through some of that history. And I hope that, I am not standing here like, let me tell you this stuff and you don't know it and I'm smarter than you. I'm 61 years old at the end of this month. I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, and much of the stuff I am sharing with you, I have learned in the last 6 or 7 years. There is stuff in this presentation I have learned in the last 36 hours. We are not taught our history. And that's one of the things that I think is so critical and important. And it's important because as we're trying to interpret what was going on and what our true history is, all we have to do is go and look. Our history is hidden, but it's hidden in plain sight. And all we have to do is be willing to wake up and smell the coffee. So let's talk about it. In 1619, there were 20 human beings that were brought to America as slaves. 20. And it all started from that. Because what people figured out very quickly is, if you have free labor, the profits that you can make go up exponentially. The first slave ship is built in Massachusetts, not in the South. So this whole thing about, well, it was the bad South and the good North when it came to slavery. No. America went in all hands on deck. And I'm asking you to look at these laws because these laws will help you understand what slavery was about. What we have here is, we know the white slave owners will be raping the black women, but their kids are not going to be free. Let's make that clear right here and right now. We're going to steal their God from them, but even if they accept our God, they're still slaves. When you look at that one, and I think about policing in America today, it sends chills up and down my spine. And look at what you can get executed for. Growing your own food. learning to read and assembling in groups. I remember talking to my great-grandmother, who was born to parents that were slaves. And I remember her saying, we had to be very careful not to show how smart we really were, because a smart black person was a threat. So, can I see a show of hands? How many people in here know about the Colonial Marines? I see about 4 hands go up, and I'm not trying to embarrass anybody. I'm trying to make the point that our history has been stolen from us. The Colonial Marines were black slaves that fought with the British in the War of 1812. And do you know why they fought for the British? Because the British told them, if we win, you get your freedom. And when people are fighting for their freedom, they can be vicious. And the Colonial Marines were vicious. They knew all the back trails because they had been slaves in the South. They knew where you could cross the rivers. And so they were of great assistance to the British in fighting the Americans. And they were part of the troop that drove the Americans back into Washington, D.C. and set the White House on fire. About 3 months later, Francis Scott Key, who was part of that American group that got driven back to Washington, D.C., is now in Baltimore at Fort McHenry. And he's watching the bombs bursting in air and getting excited and getting motivated to write the national anthem. And one of the things that Francis Scott Key wrote about was, these black Colonial Marines, they're of concern because what if all of them did that? So here is the end of the 3rd verse of our national anthem, written by Francis Scott Key. And no refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight and the gloom of the grave, and the star-spangled banner in triumph doth wave, o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. That is your national anthem, our national anthem. And my point is that from Plymouth Rock, white supremacy was the basis of how this country was formed. It doesn't mean that we're not a great country. It doesn't mean that we currently are all bigots. It means this is the truth about how our country was formed, and we can either deal with it realistically and as the truth, or we can keep trying to deny it. And in terms of keep trying to deny the nature of our true history, I feel like just saying, how's that working out for us? I'm now going to show you, in the words of the people who built the country, how important white supremacy was. Important as the soul is to the body, and without it, no house can gain a proper stability. And you're like, Jeff, that's 1784, a long time ago. Bear with me. 40 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence owned other human beings. The founding fathers of America had absolutely, positively no problem with white supremacy. They believed in it. It was the truth. It was the reality of their time. And they weren't embarrassed to say it. One of the main reasons that Native Americans were driven off their ancestral land, the plantation owners had to have room. If you're going to grow cotton and tobacco, you need a lot of land. 13% of the entire American population was enslaved by 1860? Can I see a show of hands? How many people understood that slavery was that pervasive? And maybe some, and that's good, but you know what? I guarantee if you knew that, you didn't learn it in high school, and you didn't learn it in college. You learned that somewhere else. This is not taught to us. To understand the economic dependency on slavery. And so when I talk about the monuments and the Civil War and the things that are behind this, one of the other things I would just encourage you to do, like any other investigation that you would do, follow the money. To understand what the motivation is, just follow the money. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 took 100,000 adults and sent them on our version of the Long March. And you see how many of them died on that march. What this did to the Choctaw Indians in the Southeast was horrendous. And here's why they did it. Because they needed room for this. People may think, well, I have an understanding that slavery was somehow directly tied to cotton production, and cotton production was kind of important. I want to ask you to think about that in some different terms. And before we do that, let's talk about Andrew Jackson, who was the architect of the Indian Removal Act. And our president, once again, we talk about rewriting history. You can't diss Andrew Jackson. He's on the $20 bill. And if he's on the $20 bill and he's a horrible, horrible person, what does that mean? Does that mean we have to take him off the $20 bill? Does that mean we have to start thinking about why we put him there in the first place? I don't want to deal with that. He's a great president. Well, these are the facts about Andrew Jackson that I'd ask you to consider. And that third one especially. And I want to give you a little bit more detail about that. But here's what our President of the United States has said about Andrew Jackson. And I'm going to read this. Had Andrew Jackson been a little bit later, you wouldn't have had the Civil War. He was a very tough person, but he had a big heart. And he was really angry that he saw what was happening with regard to the Civil War. He said, there's no reason for this. The problem with it is, the first problem, that Andrew Jackson was dead 16 years before the Civil War started. And I know it is. It's like, are you kidding me? But it's like as funny as a heart attack, because there are people who believe this. And this is part, you're saying like, oh, it's ridiculous. Nobody believes that. We are in 2017 and we're having a debate about what the Civil War meant. If you think that who controls the past is not important, you are wrong. Think about the arguments that we're having in this country today, and it's because the past has been concealed. This is one of the most amazing books you will ever see, written in 1839, Slavery as It Is. And the only thing these people did was to go to newspapers, cut out articles about slavery, and put them in a book. That's why they called it Slavery as It Is. And so I want to show you the real Andrew Jackson, because he had a slave that ran away and he wasn't having that. So he put an ad in the newspaper, stop the runaway, and he offered a $50 reward. That's not what I want to talk to you about. It's the end of this newspaper advertisement put in by Andrew Jackson near Nashville, state of Tennessee. And this is what it says. If you find that slave, $10 extra for every 100 lashes any person will give him, to the amount of 300. When people say folks didn't fight the Civil War about slavery, they were about defending slavery. This is years before the Civil War. This is slavery as it is. Everyone knew that this is what slavery was about. There weren't any questions about it. I offer you these laws to get you once again to think about what slavery actually meant, and especially the law from Oregon, which I don't have the adjectives for it. So, Texas school officials are saying we want our children to learn that slavery was a side issue to the Civil War because it's divisive. We have to look forward. And President Trump is saying we need to love each other now and whatever. But we need to love each other and we have to look forward, not backward. And I get that. Looking forward is important. But if you are looking forward from a place that is false, then where you're looking forward to is the road to hell. We can't go forward without acknowledging where we have been. What these people have forgotten is the story of King Cotton. And that's something that I will never forget. I didn't have to learn this in the past 6 years. I had to learn the true meaning, but I didn't have to learn the term, because King Cotton was part of my upbringing in Memphis, Tennessee. King Cotton was a food brand. King Cotton was on everything. There was actually a hotel, King Cotton, in Memphis. Army and Navy Club, completely air conditioned. Bed and halls, sprinkler protected. 3-channel radio and Muzak, and overlooking the Mississippi River. This was one of the luxury hotels in Memphis. But what does the phrase King Cotton mean? What it meant to me was bacon. Because King Cotton bacon, King Cotton sausage, King Cotton like rolls. This was like the food of my childhood. Everybody in Memphis bought King Cotton brand. And when I finally found out what the name actually stood for, I felt like I wanted to throw up. Because King Cotton, the theory that was used by Southerners before the Civil War to say, we can do this, we can break away from the North and it's economically feasible. And here's why. Everybody depends on our cotton. We can shut down the mills in the North in a heartbeat. Britain and France are going to have to make a decision. Will they support us militarily? Because we can cut down their mills. We just won't send them our cotton. It couldn't have been more practically and beautifully stated than it was by Senator Henry Hammond of South Carolina. Without firing a gun, without drawing a sword, should they make war on us, we could bring the whole world to our feet. What would happen if no cotton was furnished for 3 years? England would topple headlong and carry the whole civilized world with her, save the South. No, you dare not make war on cotton. No power on earth dares to make war upon it, because cotton is king. Follow the money. This is how important cotton was. What kind of money are we talking about? 1840, cotton made 59% of all U.S. exports. This is 15 years before the Civil War. 1.5 million pounds with about 700,000 slaves, and you can see how that changed. 2.25 billion pounds and almost 4 million slaves. This is what made America wealthy. This was the formation of wealth. And folks, I just want to make sure as a side note to say, I hope you don't think that the money made from slavery just dissolved and went up into the air. It went into companies and businesses, and not even tracing and blaming those corporations. Those corporations hired people and paid their salaries and their benefits and gave them the ability to raise families and to pass wealth on through the generations. This money is what made America financially stable. The market value of slaves in 1860 was greater than the market value of every railroad, factory, and bank combined. Follow the money, because the money we're talking about was huge. Think about the role of slaves and trade and slave labor in the economy. And that's a statistic that shocks me, because the Mississippi Valley today is one of the poorest places in America. And in 1860, more millionaires per capita than any other place in the country. And that was because of slavery. The white plantation owners did not have the capital to hire hundreds of workers to work these gigantic cotton plantations. They had to have free labor. And if there is any doubt about it, and let me just say, there is absolutely nothing wrong with retail jobs. But when you have an economy that is based exclusively on the exploitation of free labor, this is what happens. We are now 150 years later. There is no industry in the South that has replaced the slave trade and what could be worked on by slaves. The mayor of New York City recommended that New York, not the state, the city, withdraw from the Union during the Civil War. Why was that? If you go and read, it's because we are making so much money from slavery, we want to keep doing it. If we withdraw, we can then be friends with the North, then we can be friends with the South. They are saying it to you as plainly and as directly as they can. And so the people today who say the folks honored in these monuments were not fighting for slavery, my response is, I understand that that's what you want to believe. And I understand how difficult it is to wrap your mind around the fact that human beings, fellow Americans, would fight, kill other people, and die to preserve slavery. It's really hard to wrap your mind around that. But that is the ugly truth. If you read that quote from Abraham Lincoln, I was raised to understand that Abraham Lincoln was my savior. I was taught that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves because he knew that slavery was an abomination. Abraham Lincoln said on many occasions, if I could preserve the Union and keep slavery, I'd do it. If getting rid of slavery is what it takes to preserve the Union, I'll do that too. What his goal was to preserve the Union. And I just want you to know that the debate about reparations for slavery is a completely false debate. First of all, go back to 1988 when Ronald Reagan was in office. Passed with almost no dissent was a bill giving $20,000 to every Japanese American family that was interned during World War II. That was absolutely appropriate. $20,000 doesn't even begin to compensate those families for what was taken from them, for what they lost, and for being essentially imprisoned for the term of World War II. At least it was some acknowledgement that what we did was wrong. You talk about reparations for slavery, $20,000 for 4 years of internment. What is it for 256 years of slavery? And here is the kicker. Reparations were already paid because in the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln set aside $1 million for DC slave owners to be compensated for loss of property. This is our history.
If you'd like to hear more, please check out Who We Are on Amazon Prime, or look in the description of this video and you'll see the link to this speech from this university. Thank you for watching. Please share, please like, hype this video so others may find out the truth about who we are. And we'll see you next time.
What do you think about this topic?
Please leave your comments in the comment section below. Please be nice. Please click the like button and the subscribe button and the bell to get notification for more videos in the future. Thank you for watching this video on the Berean Scholars channel.